It was a Thursday night in early December. I had been working late at a small warehouse just outside the city, helping load shipments before the snow really started to come down. The temperatures had already dipped below freezing, and I remember seeing the vapor from my breath every time I stepped outside. The parking lot lights glowed dim and yellow, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. By the time I clocked out, the lot was almost empty. I didn't have much of a choice about driving home that night. My old sedan wasn't in the best shape, and it didn't handle well in snow, but I needed the overtime pay. I lived about 50 miles away, in a small town north of the city, and the only way back was a stretch of state highway that cut through mostly rural land. Farmland, woods, a few scattered gas stations, and a long stretch of nothing for about 30 miles. I stopped at a gas station on the edge of town, one of those old ones with flickering overhead lights and 2 working pumps. I topped off the tank, cleaned off the windshield, and grabbed a stale cup of coffee inside. The guy behind the counter looked half asleep and barely noticed me. It was close to 11:30 p.m. when I pulled out onto the road. There wasn't much traffic. A few trucks passed me going the opposite direction, but for the most part, it was just me and the road. The radio signal kept cutting out, so I turned it off and drove in silence. My headlights lit up the road ahead, but everything else was swallowed by blackness. The snow hadn't started yet, but the clouds above were thick, and the moon barely showed. As I got further from the city, the roadside lights disappeared. The road narrowed, and the trees got thicker on both sides. I knew this route well. I'd driven it hundreds of times, but it always felt different at night. Not scary exactly, just lonely, like the world had shrunk to just the space inside my car and whatever the headlights touched. About 15 miles in, I passed a familiar red barn on the right and a small dirt road that curved off into the woods. A mile later, I saw something odd. There was a car pulled off onto the shoulder up ahead. Its hazard lights weren't on, but the driver's door was wide open. As I got closer, I slowed down. The car was an older model, maybe from the late 90s. No lights, no movement. I kept driving. I didn't stop. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Something about that open door in the dark didn't sit right with me. I checked the rearview mirror a few times but saw nothing behind me. A few miles later, I passed a small bridge that ran over a narrow creek. As I crossed it, I thought I saw movement off to the left, something in the trees, but when I looked again, there was nothing. Probably just a deer or some other animal. I tried not to think about it. The road dipped down into a stretch of thick woods. This was the part one always hated, even in daylight. The trees grew close to the road, and the branches sometimes scratched the roof if you got too close to the edge. It felt like driving through a tunnel. About halfway through the wooded stretch, I saw another car. This one was stopped right in the middle of the road, facing me. Its headlights were off and it wasn't moving. I hit the brakes hard and came to a stop about 30 feet away. My heart started racing. I waited. Nothing happened. No one got out. No lights turned on. Just silence. I inched forward slowly, half expecting someone to jump out. As I got closer, I saw that the car was empty. No one in the driver's seat. No one in the passenger side either. Both front doors were closed, but the trunk was slightly open. I drove around it, my tires crunching over gravel and twigs on the shoulder. My hands were shaking. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the car shrinking behind me. Then it was gone. I tried to focus on driving. Just keep moving, I told myself. 20 more miles. 10 minutes later, my headlights picked up something in the road again. This time, it wasn't a car. It was a person. A man, I think, standing in the middle of the lane, not moving. I honked the horn. No reaction. I slowed down to a crawl. The figure didn't move. He was wearing dark clothes, maybe a hoodie. His arms were at his sides, and his face was hidden in shadow. I pulled into the other lane to go around him. As I passed, I kept my eyes forward. I didn't look at him. Couldn't. After I passed, I hit the gas and kept going. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my jeans. I kept checking the mirrors. The road was empty behind me. No headlights, no movement. I finally saw a road sign. My town was only 12 miles away. I started to calm down, just a little. That's when I heard the thump. Came from the trunk. I froze. Another thump, louder this time, like something or someone was back there. I pulled over fast, right onto the narrow shoulder. I turned off the engine and listened. Silence. I got out of the car. The cold hit me hard. I walked to the back and stared at the trunk. My hand shook as I reached for the key. I opened it. Nothing. Just the spare tire and my old roadside kit. A blanket. A few tools. Nothing else. I closed the trunk slowly, got back in the car, locked the doors, started the engine. I drove the rest of the way home fast. Too fast. When I pulled into my driveway, it was just after 1 a.m. I sat in the car for a while, engine off, hands still on the wheel. I live alone, so the house was dark. I went inside, checked every room. Nothing out of place. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about that open car door, the empty vehicle, the man in the road. The next morning, I called the sheriff's office, told them what I saw. They didn't seem surprised. They said they'd send someone out to check. A week later, I drove that route again during daylight. I stopped at the spot where the car had been. Nothing there. No tire marks. No sign anyone had ever been there. The area where the man had stood looked the same. Just trees. But the weirdest part was the bridge. The creek under it was dry. Had been for years, according to a friend of mine who grew up nearby. Said it had never run in winter. I still take that route sometimes, but never at night. Not anymore. It was just supposed to be a quiet, late-night drive. Nothing complicated. I had done it plenty of times before. Hop in the car, fill up a thermos with coffee, turn on some music or a podcast, and let the dark road stretch out in front of me. I liked the peace of it, the stillness. Driving at night had a different feel. The world was quieter, more still, like time slowed down. That night started off the same way. I left my apartment around 10:30 p.m. I had just finished a long week at work and wanted to clear my head. I didn't really have a destination in mind. I figured I'd head out on Route 67 and drive north into the hills. Maybe make a loop through the back roads before circling back down to the city by sunrise. I used to do that a lot when I was younger. Just drive for the sake of it. The road was mostly empty as I headed out of town. A few semi-trucks here and there, the occasional pair of headlights slipping by in the other direction. But for the most part, it was just me and the road. I rolled the windows down a bit to get some cool air and turned the music low. I didn't feel tired at all, which was surprising considering how long my week had been. It wasn't long before I got away from the last bits of light. The city glow behind me faded fast, and all I had in front of me were my headlights cutting through the darkness. The trees lined the highway, thick on either side. At that hour, the woods felt closer somehow, like they were pressing in around the road. About an hour in, I turned off onto a smaller highway, Highway 28. It wasn't completely unfamiliar. I'd taken it a few times before, years ago, when I was younger and used to explore more. It ran northwest, winding up through some low mountain areas. Not exactly the most popular road, especially at night, but I wasn't worried. That stretch of road had no streetlights. The only light came from my headlights and the occasional reflective sign or marker. I could barely make out anything beyond the road's edge, just the shape of trees and brush. My tires hummed along the blacktop. I passed a few old farms, a broken-down gas station, and a couple of empty pull-offs, but otherwise it was dead quiet. I remember glancing at the clock. It was 11:47 p.m. I was about 10 miles from a small town I vaguely remembered, Valton or maybe Vanton. It didn't matter. I figured I'd pass through it, grab a coffee at whatever gas station was open, then keep going. The first strange thing I noticed was a dark SUV pulled off to the side of the road. It was parked on the shoulder, no lights on, no hazard blinkers, just sitting there, dead. I slowed a bit as I passed, just in case someone was inside who needed help, but I couldn't see anyone. The windows were too dark. Something about the way it was parked struck me as off. Not like someone who had car trouble. It was angled oddly, like it had drifted to a stop rather than pulled over deliberately. I kept going. There was no good reason to stop. About 5 minutes later, I noticed headlights behind me. I didn't think much of it at first, just another late-night driver. But they were gaining fast. The lights got closer and closer until they were just a few car lengths behind. I figured they'd pass, but they didn't. They just stayed there, riding my bumper. I tapped my brakes lightly to signal for them to back off. They didn't. No honk, no flash of the brights, just steady pressure, tailgating me like they were trying to push me faster. I wasn't comfortable with it, so I sped up a bit. Not too much, just enough to give myself some space. They sped up too, still right on me. I took a sharp curve in the road and checked the rearview mirror again. The vehicle behind me was that same dark SUV I had seen on the side of the road earlier. Same make, same color, same dark tinted windows. Couldn't have been a coincidence. I hadn't seen any other cars out there. I hadn't passed any turnoffs or driveways where it could have come from. I started getting this tight feeling in my chest. That low, creeping anxiety that starts in your gut and works its way up. I slowed down again, hoping maybe they'd just go around. But they didn't. They stayed glued to my back bumper, close enough that I couldn't even see their headlights anymore, just the faint glow around the edges of my mirror. There was nowhere to pull over safely, and no other cars on the road. No cell signal either, I checked. Nothing. Just the woods and this guy behind me. After another few minutes of this, I decided to test something. I took a sudden right onto a narrow side road I hadn't planned to take. It was rough, almost more of a dirt road than pavement. I figured if they weren't actually following me, they'd keep going. But they turned right behind me. Now I knew for sure. They were following me. That little road wound through dense woods. No signs, no markers. It was the kind of road hunters and locals used, but it didn't lead anywhere fast. I figured if I kept going, I'd eventually reach a small lake or campground I remembered from years ago. The road was rough. Potholes and ruts made the drive slow. My car bounced and rattled. The SUV behind me didn't seem bothered. Kept the same distance, same position, never speeding up or slowing down. I started thinking about what to do if they tried something. I had no weapon, no real way to protect myself. My phone was useless out here. I thought about just stopping and confronting them, but something about that felt wrong. Unsafe. After a few miles, I reached a fork in the road. No signs, just two dirt paths splitting into the trees. I took the left, barely slowing down. The SUV followed. I drove like that for what felt like an hour. My hands were tight on the wheel. My breath was shallow. Every sound in the car seemed louder. The rumble of the engine, the rattle of my thermos in the cup holder, the crackling of gravel under the tires. The headlights behind me never wavered. Eventually, I saw something up ahead. Clearing. It looked like an old construction area. Flattened dirt, maybe used for logging or utility access years ago. I remembered it now. I camped there once with a friend in high school. It was a dead end, but I had an idea. I pulled into the clearing and turned hard, cutting the wheel to spin the car around fast. I stopped facing the direction I came from. I turned my lights off. The SUV pulled in a few seconds later. It crept into the clearing slowly, its headlights sweeping side to side. I couldn't see inside the vehicle. It stopped about 30 feet away from me, just idling, facing me. We sat like that for a while, two vehicles facing each other in the dark, engines humming. I could feel my heart pounding. My hand hovered over the gear shift. After about 30 seconds, the SUV turned its lights off. That hit me harder than anything else so far. They didn't drive away. They didn't leave. They just shut off their lights and sat there in total darkness. I couldn't see anything now, just blackness. No moon, no street lights. I turned my lights back on, but all I saw was the front end of the SUV, sitting quietly. I didn't wait. I slammed the car into reverse, backed up in a tight circle, and floored it back the way I came. The SUV didn't follow. I drove for 20 minutes straight before I stopped. Eventually, I came to a spot where I got a weak cell signal. I pulled over and sat there, shaking, waiting for the signal to hold steady. I didn't even try to call anyone at first. I just sat and let the engine idle while I stared at the empty road behind me. When the bars held for more than 30 seconds, I called a friend, just to have someone know I was out there. I didn't explain everything, Just said I was out late and felt off. I didn't want to sound paranoid, even though I felt completely rattled. I kept driving until I reached a major highway again. By the time I made it back to town, it was almost 4 a.m. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my apartment with the lights on, checking the window every few minutes. The next day, I went back to that route online, trying to see if anyone had reported strange activity in that area. Nothing came up. No news stories, no alerts. Just empty forums and old posts from years ago talking about hunters and camping. I've never found out who was in that SUV or what they wanted. Maybe it was someone just messing around. Maybe it was something worse. All I know is that it wasn't normal and it wasn't harmless. People don't follow strangers down dead-end dirt roads in the middle of the night for no reason. I stopped doing night drives after that. I sold the car a month later. I still think about it sometimes. How quiet everything was. How calm the person must have been to just sit there in the dark. Not chasing, not threatening, just watching, like they had all the time in the world. And I think that's what scared me the most. Not the chase, not the road, but that stillness, that cold, quiet patience. Like they'd done it before, like they were waiting for something, like maybe they still are. It was close to midnight when I left the warehouse. The place was out near the edge of the industrial park, surrounded by flat land, gravel lots, and a couple old factories that had been shut down for years. I was covering a late shift that night, mostly just checking inventory for a parts supplier I worked for. The job wasn't hard, just quiet and repetitive, but that night had dragged on longer than usual. By the time I got back in my truck, I was tired and sore, and all I wanted was to get home, take a hot shower and fall into bed. The air was cold, not freezing, but cold enough that it felt sharp when I stepped outside. It had rained earlier in the evening, just a short drizzle, and now the roads were still slick with that wet sheen that makes every light stretch into long reflections. I climbed into the driver's seat, tossed my bag onto the passenger side, and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life like it always did. I let it warm up for a second, flicked the heater on, and rubbed my hands together. My breath fogged a little in the cabin. I backed out slow, trying not to throw water up from the puddles, and started heading toward the exit. There wasn't much traffic out there that late, just the occasional semi or a car parked off to the side. Dark inside. The road that led away from the industrial park wasn't well lit. There were a few scattered streetlights, but most of them flickered or were completely dead. It was mostly just my headlights cutting through the night, the beams bouncing off wet pavement and signs as I drove. I took a right onto the main road. I had about a 40-minute drive home, and I usually took the highway, but sometimes I took the back roads if I wanted a quieter ride. That night, I figured I'd take the back way. I wasn't in the mood for fast lanes or bright freeway lights. I just wanted to drive through the dark and let the night pass quietly. The back road was mostly two-lane, no shoulder, just trees and open fields on either side. There were a few small neighborhoods scattered here and there, but for the most part, it was empty. Just long stretches of road cutting through flat land and woods. I'd driven it 100 times before, maybe more. I knew every curve, every stretch where deer liked to come out, every dip that collected rainwater. About 20 minutes in, I passed the old farmhouse. I always looked at it, even though I never saw any lights on. The place looked abandoned. The paint was peeling, and one of the windows had a board across it. The front yard was just weeds and mud. I wondered sometimes if anyone still lived there. That night, though, I didn't even slow down. Just kept going, tired and quiet, letting the heater fill the cab with warm air. The road was empty. Not a single car passed me going the other direction, and I didn't see any taillights ahead. Just my truck and the dark. About 5 minutes later, I saw something ahead, just a flash of white near the side of the road. I slowed down. My first thought was deer, but it wasn't moving like one. It wasn't fast. It was more like someone walking. As I got closer, I saw it was a person, walking along the shoulder with their back to me. They had on a white hoodie, the hood pulled up, and dark pants. It looked like they were holding something in their right hand, but I couldn't tell what. I passed them slow, glancing over. They didn't turn, didn't look at me, just kept walking. I got a weird feeling right then. Not fear, but something off. It was almost 1 in the morning, on a back road in the middle of nowhere, and someone was just walking alone with no lights, no bag, nothing. It wasn't like there was a bus stop or store anywhere nearby, just road and woods. I kept driving. About a mile later, I passed another person. This one was on the other side of the road, walking in the same direction as the first. Same hoodie, same pants, same slow walk. I slowed down again, looked hard. It wasn't the same person, it couldn't be. There hadn't been anywhere they could have turned off or crossed to get ahead of me like that. It was just road and trees. No driveways, no paths, no shortcuts, but they looked exactly the same. That's when I started to feel it, that crawling feeling at the base of your neck, like someone watching you, like something isn't quite right but you can't explain it. I didn't stop. I didn't even look in the mirror. I just pushed the gas a little harder and kept going. The next few miles were quiet. Nothing but road and my headlights, moving past the dark trees on either side. I started telling myself maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe some kids out walking. Maybe a prank. Maybe I was tired and just seeing things wrong. That's what I told myself. Then I saw the third one. Same white hoodie, same walk. This one was standing still, facing the road. Just standing there near the ditch, arms at their sides. I didn't slow down. I didn't look. I felt cold again, even though the heater was blowing warm air full blast. My hands felt tight on the steering wheel. My jaw clenched. I felt my stomach twist a little. Something was wrong. Something was seriously wrong. I was still about 15 minutes from the next town, and I didn't want to stop out there in the dark. I figured I'd drive straight through, get somewhere with lights, maybe stop at a gas station, maybe call someone. I didn't even know who I'd call. The cops? What would I say? I saw people in hoodies walking on a public road, but it wasn't just that. It was something in the way they moved, or didn't move. It was the way they looked the same. No cars parked anywhere, no houses nearby, just people standing or walking all alone, spaced out every mile or so. The road curved left, and I saw headlights ahead. Another car. I felt a little better. It was the first one I'd seen in a while. It was coming toward me, but slow, real slow. As it got closer, I realized something was wrong with it. The car's front end was smashed. One headlight was out, the other flickering. It looked like it had hit something hard. The windshield was cracked on the driver's side, and the hood was bent up like it had been folded back. I slowed down as I passed. I glanced in. I couldn't see the driver, couldn't see anyone. The inside of the car was dark. No cabin lights on, no movement, just a wrecked car creeping forward like it was being pushed. I looked in the rear view and saw the brake lights fade into the distance behind me. I didn't say anything, just gripped the wheel and stared ahead. That's when the road started to feel unfamiliar. I'd driven this road so many times, but things looked different now. The turns were a little sharper than I remembered. The tree lines seemed closer. The mile markers were gone. There were no road signs, no speed limit signs, no signs for turns or towns or crossings. Nothing, just black road and trees pressing in on both sides. I looked at the clock. It said 12:47 a.m. That didn't seem right. I felt like I'd been driving longer than that. It should have been past 1 by now. I kept going. Then my headlights picked up something in the road ahead. Person, right in the middle of the lane, facing me. Same hoodie, same pants. I slammed the brakes hard. The truck skidded a little on the wet pavement, tires squealing. I stopped about 20 feet from them. My headlights lit them up bright. They didn't move. They just stood there. I didn't honk. I didn't open the window. I didn't move. I stared, waiting. Then slowly they stepped to the side, off the road, into the dark. I drove past them, not looking, not breathing. The trees started to thin out, and I saw lights ahead. It was the gas station at the edge of the next town. I pulled in fast, rolled up near the front, parked under the bright canopy lights, and shut the truck off. I sat there for a minute, breathing hard, staring at the wheel. Inside the station, the lights were on. There was a guy at the counter, mopping or stocking shelves or something. I got out, walked inside, and stood there under the harsh fluorescent lights for a minute. I wasn't sure what to do. I felt like I just stepped off a nightmare road. I bought a bottle of water, walked back to the truck, and sat for a while. I drank slowly, watching the street outside. Nothing passed. No cars. No people. I got back on the main road, took the highway home. It was empty but normal. Signs, billboards, taillights in the distance. Just a regular night highway. When I got home, I sat in the driveway with the engine running, lights off. I just sat there for a while, staring out the windshield. I kept thinking about the people I'd passed. How they never looked at me. How they looked exactly the same. How the road had felt wrong. Like it had stretched or shifted under my tires. Like I'd slipped into some version of that route I wasn't supposed to be on. I never took the back way again. Not once since that night. I still think about it sometimes. About how real it all felt. About how nothing actually happened, but everything felt wrong anyway. That's what stuck with me the most. It wasn't a scream or a chase or some sudden crash. It was just that slow, sinking feeling that something was wrong and no one was going to believe me when I said it out loud. But I know what I saw. I remember the faces I didn't see. I remember the road without signs. The car that drove itself. The people. I'd been on the road for about 7 hours before the night really settled in. I was coming back from a weekend visit to see my cousin who lived a few towns over, out near a quiet spot in Missouri, the kind of place where streetlights were rare and roads were long stretches of cracked pavement between cornfields, wooded patches, and the occasional falling down barn. I left late on purpose. I liked driving at night. Less traffic, less noise. Just me, the hum of the engine, and miles of empty highway. That night, I regretted every bit of it. It was early fall, and though the leaves had started to dry and curl on the trees, most were still clinging on. The road I took was familiar, one I'd driven a dozen times. The stretch I had ahead of me was 2-lane, no divider, no real shoulder to speak of, just blacktop and ditches. I had about an hour and a half left before I'd get back to my apartment in the city. That was the plan. Around 10:45 p.m., I passed a sign for a turnoff I didn't recognize. It was an old metal sign, bent a little, reading Walker Ridge Road in faded white letters. I had no reason to turn, so I didn't, but maybe 20 minutes after that, my check engine light blinked on. I let out a breath and tightened my grip on the wheel. I kept the car steady and listened for changes in the engine. There wasn't much. Sounded the same. But that light, I'd just gotten the oil changed the week before. Tires were good. Battery was new. I tried to ignore it, but the car had a way of making you listen. 5 minutes later, I felt the first shudder. A subtle hiccup under my seat, like the engine stuttered for a second. Then it kept going. I sat up straighter and killed the radio. Silence but for the tires on pavement and that light glowing red on the dash. Then it happened again. The car shuddered harder and the RPM needle dipped low. I eased off the gas, and the car jerked once before settling again. I didn't want to stop on that road. There were no lights around, no cars behind me, and not a house in sight. Just endless black around the edges of my headlights, the sky moonless and cloudy, like something heavy was hanging in the air. A couple miles more and I saw an old gravel turnout coming up on the right. No signs, just a crude break in the brush, like someone had carved it out years ago and never came back to fix it. Still, I didn't want to stop on the road. If the car died and another driver came, I'd be sitting in the middle of nowhere, asking to get clipped. So I pulled in, tires crunching over loose gravel, and let the car idle. I popped the hood and left the engine running while I got out. The night air was colder than I expected. It smelled like old wood and wet leaves, thick and earthy. I used the flashlight on my phone, shining it into the engine bay, looking for any obvious leak or smoke. Nothing jumped out. No steam, no burnt smell, nothing dripping. I checked the oil just in case. Level was good. Clean, too. I stood there for another minute, just listening to the idling engine. Still sounded fine, so I figured maybe it was a sensor issue, nothing serious. I shut the hood and turned back to the car. That's when I noticed the woods. They were right there, not even 10 feet from the edge of the gravel lot. I must have passed hundreds of patches like it already, but this one felt different. The trees were tighter, denser, like they leaned inward at the top. The undergrowth was thick but not high, like nothing tall had grown here in years. It was just vines, roots, and bare dirt in places, like something had been moving through often enough to keep things trampled down. I told myself not to think about it and climbed back in the car. I turned the wheel to ease back onto the road, but as I pressed the gas, the car sputtered and the engine cut out. It went dead like someone had turned a key. 1 second alive, the next completely quiet. No power. Dash was dark. Lights went off. I sat there, blinking at the steering wheel. I tried the ignition. Nothing. No click, no turnover. Just silence. I tried again and again. Same thing. My phone still worked, and I had a signal, thankfully, but I hesitated to call roadside help. Last time I'd waited for them, it took over 3 hours, and that was during the day. Out here, I didn't know how long it might be. Maybe I could fix it. Maybe it just needed a reset. I got out and popped the hood again, pulled the battery cables, waited, reconnected them, tried the key. Still nothing. I was about to cave and make the call when I heard something move in the woods behind me. It wasn't a small sound, not like a squirrel or wind. It was heavy, a step, maybe 2, something brushing against dry limbs. I froze with my hand still on the driver's side door. I turned slowly toward the trees but couldn't see anything past the beams of the headlights, which were still glowing faintly off battery power. I held my breath. Another sound, closer, not rushed, just deliberate, like someone walking, not through brush, but on cleared dirt. It didn't make sense. I stepped back and scanned with my phone's flashlight, but the beam only reached so far. The edges of it caught branches, leaves, and nothing else. No eyes, no body, but I could hear it. Then silence again. I got in the car and locked the doors, even though I knew that wasn't much. I kept telling myself it was probably a deer, or maybe a wild dog nosing around. I waited a minute, then another. When nothing else happened, I opened the door again, phone tight in my hand, and moved to the trunk. I always kept a small emergency kit, tools, jumper cables, flashlight, even a flare. I opened it and was about to dig inside when I heard footsteps again, this time to my left. Not from the woods directly, but behind me, where the gravel lot met the tree line. I didn't even look. I slammed the trunk shut and got back in the car. I sat there, breathing hard, trying to think. I didn't want to call the cops because I had no proof of anything, and I knew how that went. They'd say it was probably nothing, maybe send a car out in a few hours if I was lucky. I didn't have time to wait. Then I saw the flare. It was tucked in the kit. I grabbed it, climbed out, and struck it. The red light hissed to life, bright and angry, and lit up the lot like a campfire. I held it high and turned in a full circle, trying to see what was around me. Nothing, just woods, cracked gravel, my dead car, and then I saw the footprints, in the dirt just past the passenger side, heading toward the trees. Not boot prints, bare feet, wide, flat, and long. The toes sunk deep, fresh. I don't know how I missed them before. I backed toward the road, holding the flare like it could actually protect me. Then something snapped a branch deep in the trees, hard, like it was kicked. That was enough. I ran to the center of the road and just started walking. No cars in sight, just dark highway and a long, cold walk ahead of me. I figured I'd get to a gas station or a house eventually, maybe 5-10 miles. Better that than waiting in a dead car with something stalking around in the woods. I kept the flare lit and held it at my side like a torch, walking with my head down and ears wide open. I walked for about an hour. My legs started to ache. My shoes weren't meant for distance. The flare burned out halfway through, so I used my phone's flashlight again, sweeping the ground ahead of me. Still no cars. Then I heard something behind me, not footsteps, not breathing, a slow rumble, an engine. I turned and saw headlights in the distance. I felt a rush of relief, but as it got closer, something in me hesitated. The truck was old, boxy, high clearance, looked like a military surplus vehicle. Big grille, no markings, no plate on the front, no lights in the cab. It slowed down when it reached me but didn't stop. Just crawled past, maybe 10 miles an hour. I stood off to the side of the road and watched it go. Couldn't see the driver. Windows were too dark. Then the truck braked and stopped about 40 feet ahead. I didn't move. It sat there, brake lights glowing. No door opened. No window rolled down. I turned and started walking back the other way. The truck idled for a second, then slowly turned around in the middle of the road and started coming back toward me. I stepped off into the ditch and into the edge of the trees. I crouched low, phone light off, and held my breath. The truck drove by again, slower this time, like it was looking. Then it stopped again. Engine running, lights on. No one got out. I stayed crouched in the brush, hidden in shadow, and waited. My legs went numb. The truck idled there for what felt like forever. Then, finally, it backed up a bit, turned, and rolled away the way it came. I waited another 10 minutes before I got out of the woods and started walking again. But I stayed off the road this time, hiking through brush, cutting through woods when I had to, just trying to move parallel to the road. It was almost 2:30 a.m. by the time I saw lights ahead. A gas station, glowing yellow and green in the distance. I nearly broke into a run. Inside, the cashier gave me a strange look when I walked in all scratched and dirty. I asked to use the phone, called for a tow and then a friend from the city. It was about 10 minutes past midnight when I left the gas station off a small state highway in northern Arizona. I had just filled up my tank, grabbed a bottle of water, and a bag of trail mix. The cashier looked half asleep. The place was dead quiet, and the parking lot had only one other car in it, some beat-up sedan with faded paint. I didn't think much of it at the time. My plan was to make it a few more hours down the highway before I pulled off and slept in the back of my SUV. I had a sleeping bag and a pillow thrown in back and had done it plenty of times before. It was my usual setup when I did long solo drives. The road was dark, and the sky was black. No moon, no stars, just a thick cover of clouds. I had maybe 70 miles of two-lane highway ahead of me until the next small town. The GPS showed a couple of curves, a bridge, and one or two offshoot dirt roads that led into what looked like Forest Service areas or private ranches. There was barely any cell service, but I had downloaded the maps earlier. At that hour, traffic was pretty much dead. I hadn't seen another vehicle for almost an hour, and the headlights of my SUV stretched way ahead into empty road. The landscape was flat for the most part, with low bushes and patches of scrub trees, and the occasional fence line running parallel to the road. I kept my eyes forward, hands at 10 and 2, music off. I liked the quiet sometimes. The hum of the engine, the tires on pavement, my own breathing. Everything felt balanced. About 15 minutes after leaving the gas station, I saw a reflective road sign up ahead, just one of those yellow deer crossing signs. But right after I passed it, I saw something odd. It looked like a person standing on the shoulder of the road. At first I thought maybe it was a broken down motorist or a hitchhiker, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't either. It was a man, probably mid-40s, standing dead still, facing the road, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. No bag, no vehicle nearby, just him standing there, maybe 3 feet from the white line. His arms were at his sides. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't seem to react to my headlights. I slowed just a little as I passed him, not sure what to make of it, but I didn't stop. Something about him just seemed off. No flashlight, no attempt to flag me down, just a blank stare. I checked the mirror as I drove past. He was still standing there, same posture, not turning his head or anything. I kept driving. 5 minutes later, I was still thinking about him. I told myself maybe he was drunk. Maybe his car broke down and he was in shock. But something gnawed at me. That stretch of highway didn't have any cross streets, no houses, no stores, nothing. Just wilderness. I went back and forth in my head about turning around. But I didn't. About 20 minutes later, maybe 30 miles down the road, I saw something else. Headlights in the distance, facing toward me, but not moving. As I got closer, I realized it was a pickup truck, parked sideways across the road, blocking both lanes. It was old-looking, maybe from the late 80s or early 90s. Its lights were on, the engine running. The driver's side door was open. No sign of anyone. I slowed down immediately and brought the SUV to a stop about 30 yards away. My first thought was accident. Maybe the driver hit something, maybe he was injured nearby. But the truck didn't look wrecked. It was just there, parked across the road like someone wanted to make sure no one could pass. I stayed inside my vehicle and didn't move. I looked around. No movement anywhere. I turned off my headlights but left the engine running. My hands sat on the steering wheel, knuckles white. I felt something creeping up in my chest. Not fear exactly, not yet, but that first flicker of it. Like your instincts trying to wake you up. I sat like that for maybe 2 full minutes. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anything. No wind, no animals, no bugs. Just silence. It was like the whole place was muffled. Then I saw it, movement. Something shifted near the edge of the trees on the left side of the road, maybe 10 feet behind the truck. At first it looked like a shadow. Then I realized it was a person. They were crouched low, like squatting or kneeling, and they slowly stood up. Another person stood up next to them. Then another. 3 people. All of them rising slowly like they'd been laying in the brush or something. They weren't carrying anything, and I couldn't make out their faces. My headlights weren't on, so all I had was the dim light from the truck ahead. I put the SUV in reverse and backed up slowly. I didn't slam it. I didn't make any sudden moves. I just crept back along the road. The truck didn't move. The people didn't run. But they turned toward me, all 3 of them. Then they started walking slow, steady, right toward my SUV. I kept backing up. 10 feet, 20, 50. My breath was short and shallow. I couldn't think straight. My brain just kept saying, this isn't right, this isn't right. I finally got far enough to where I felt I had a safe turning radius, and I whipped the wheel hard left and U-turned across the center line. As soon as my tires straightened out, I hit the gas. Not all the way, but enough to gain speed quick. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. My chest was tight. My neck felt like it was shrinking into my shoulders. I was scared now, fully alert. Whatever was happening back there, I wasn't supposed to be a part of it. I drove back the way I came for 10 miles, maybe 12. I passed the deer sign again, past the area where that first man had been standing. He was gone now. The shoulder was empty. The gas station I had stopped at wasn't open anymore. The lights were off, the doors locked. No cars in the lot. I didn't even slow down. I just kept driving until I saw the lights of the next highway junction. I merged onto the interstate without thinking, just following the signs. By the time I stopped driving, it was almost 4 in the morning. I pulled off into a brightly lit rest area and parked between 2 semi-trucks. I locked all the doors and didn't get out. I just sat in the driver's seat, watching the sun rise through the dirty windshield. I didn't sleep. I stayed there until the sun was fully up. The air was bright. The sky was clear. It felt like a totally different world from a few hours before. I got out, stretched my legs, used the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked pale, eyes bloodshot. I could still feel the buzz of adrenaline in my arms and legs. That day, I went to the nearest sheriff's office. I didn't want to call 911 because I didn't know if it was even an emergency anymore. I told the deputy what I saw, the man on the roadside, the truck parked sideways, the people coming out of the brush. He wrote everything down. He asked a few questions. He didn't act surprised. He said they'd check it out. I didn't stick around to see what they found. I just wanted to be away from that area, far away. Weeks later, I searched news stories online. Nothing. No missing persons, no reports of roadblocks, no arrests, no updates. It was like it never happened. Maybe nothing came of it. Maybe I interrupted something before it could escalate. Maybe they moved on. Sometimes I think I should have gone back, tried to get a license plate number off the truck or taken pictures. But at the time, all I could think about was getting away from there. I've done a lot of night driving in my life. I've been through rough towns, mountain roads, sketchy neighborhoods. But that stretch of highway, whatever was happening out there that night, it felt planned, coordinated, not random. That's what scared me most. It wasn't just bad luck. It felt like something that had been set up. I still think about it sometimes when I drive late at night. especially when I pass parked cars on the shoulder or see someone standing near the road. I don't stop anymore. I don't even slow down. I just keep driving, and I never take that highway again. I had been on the road for most of the day. The sun had already dipped under the horizon, and I still had another 2 or 3 hours to go before I'd reach the motel I'd booked. I was driving east through the flat, wide parts of central Kansas, headed toward a small town where I was supposed to meet someone early the next morning for a property job. I had taken a detour off the main interstate earlier that afternoon, thinking a more direct rural route would cut time and give me a break from the endless traffic, but I miscalculated badly. The road was slower than expected, winding and sometimes gravel, and now I was stuck driving through the middle of nowhere in complete darkness. The gas station I stopped at around 6 had been the last real sign of civilization I saw. After that, the towns on the map turned out to be little more than a few houses and maybe a grain silo or two. I was on a 2-lane highway, but calling it a highway felt like a stretch. It was more like an old farm route. The pavement was cracked, the painted lines faded, and in some places, the road felt like it had been forgotten completely. On either side of me was nothing but open fields, and beyond them, trees in patches. The land was flat, but occasionally dipped into these low areas where your headlights would just disappear into blackness for a second before the ground rose up again. There was no moon that night, no other cars, just the steady hum of my engine, the glow of the dashboard, and the feeling that I had gotten too far from anything familiar. At first, I didn't think much of it. I've done long drives before. The isolation can even be calming if you're in the right mindset. But this time, there was something different. Something I couldn't really pin down. About an hour after dark, I started to feel like something was off. Started small. I kept checking my rearview mirror more than normal. I wasn't nervous, not yet, just hyper-aware. My eyes would go from the road to the mirror every 30 seconds, and after a while I realized I wasn't really looking to change lanes or check for cars. I was just checking, I guess trying to reassure myself that I was still alone. But every time I looked, I saw the same thing, nothing. Just 2 red dots from my tail lights glowing faintly against the dark. At one point, I passed a small turnout, just a dirt patch with some flattened weeds, and I saw something there, something low to the ground. It looked like a tire or a dark tarp maybe, or even an animal, but I couldn't make it out fully. I thought about turning around to see what it was, but I didn't. Something in my gut told me to just keep going. I had this quiet voice in the back of my head that said, "Don't stop, not here." I tried to shake it off. Told myself I was just tired, just being jumpy because of the long drive and the dark. But a few minutes later, I passed another turnout. This one was wider and right on the edge of the trees. I thought I saw a vehicle there, maybe an old truck, sitting completely dark, no lights, no movement. It was parked sideways, like someone had pulled in fast or carelessly. I slowed down slightly but didn't stop. I told myself it could just be a local farmer or someone taking a break. That made sense, right? But why park like that? And why no lights? The farther I went, the more those little things piled up. I started noticing more of those pull-offs, sometimes every few miles, sometimes closer. A couple of them had nothing, just the dent in the grass and dirt. A few had objects in them I couldn't fully make out. One had something tall and narrow, maybe a post or maybe a person. Couldn't be sure. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. I passed a turnout that I swear I had already passed before. It looked exactly the same. The same 2 tire tracks worn into the dirt, the same fallen tree limb lying off to the side, the same pattern of weeds flattened around it. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. A lot of these pull-offs looked similar, but a few miles later, I passed another one that looked exactly like it. Same shape, same marks, same everything. That's when I started to really worry. I checked my GPS. It was still showing my route, but my phone said no service in the top corner. The blue dot was still moving, but it had started lagging slightly behind my actual location. The map wasn't refreshing. I tapped the screen, zoomed out, then zoomed in again. Nothing changed. I felt a chill go down my back. Not from the cold, just that creeping kind of feeling that makes your hands sweat and your stomach feel tight. I kept driving, gripping the wheel tighter, staring at the road ahead. I couldn't tell if the turns and dips were actually changing, or if I was going in circles somehow. The road never had any signs, no mile markers, no intersections, just the occasional fence line or distant light way out on the horizon, probably from a farmhouse miles away. And then, without warning, my headlights flashed across something in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes and swerved a little, tires squealing. It was a pallet, one of those wooden ones you find behind stores, sitting right in the middle of the lane. I came to a stop a few yards short of it. My heart was pounding. I sat there with my foot on the brake, staring at it. There was no reason for it to be there. It didn't fall off a truck. There hadn't been any traffic. It looked like someone placed it there on purpose. I didn't want to get out, but I couldn't drive around it either. The road shoulders were too narrow, and there were ditches on either side. I sat for a long time thinking. Then I backed up slowly, gave myself some space, and nudged the front of my car forward until the bumper pushed the pallet enough for it to tip and roll off to the side. I didn't look around. I didn't want to. I just hit the gas and kept going. I drove for another 30 minutes, maybe more. No signs, no cars, no lights. My fuel gauge was dropping, and I was starting to worry that if I didn't find something soon, I'd end up stranded out there. I thought about turning around, but I didn't even know where I was anymore. Turning around might just take me back to the same spots I'd already passed. Then I saw something up ahead. Lights, flickering yellow-orange ones, like from torches or lanterns. They were off the road a bit, maybe 100 yards into a tree line, grouped close together. I slowed down but didn't stop. They weren't moving. They weren't swinging like someone holding them, just stationary, almost evenly spaced. I didn't know what to make of it. A campfire? A bonfire party? But why way out here? I didn't get out. I didn't pull over. I kept driving. 15 minutes later, I saw something else, movement, just on the edge of my lights. A figure stepping back into the brush on the right side of the road. It was too quick to see details. I only caught a glimpse of dark clothing, maybe a hood. No face, just a person stepping back into the shadows like they'd been watching and didn't want to be seen. That was when I knew I wasn't just imagining things. Someone was out here, watching the road. Maybe more than one person. And they weren't just locals going about their business. They were waiting. I kept going, tried to stay calm. I kept telling myself, just get to the next town. Just make it to a gas station or a lit parking lot or anything with people. But the road didn't change. No signs, no lights. I was starting to believe that wherever I was, it didn't lead anywhere. Around 11, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror for the first time all night. They were far back, barely visible, but they were there. At first, I felt relieved. Another driver. Maybe I wasn't so alone out here. But then I realized something. The lights weren't gaining on me. They stayed exactly the same distance behind. I sped up a little. They sped up too. I slowed down. They slowed. Whoever was behind me was matching my speed perfectly. Not passing, not dropping back. They followed me for 20 minutes like that. Never getting closer, never disappearing. Then my fuel light came on. I started sweating, checking my dashboard every few seconds. I had maybe 30 miles left, maybe less, and I had no idea how far the next town was. Then I saw it. A turn off to the right. A road sign blank. Not a town name, not a highway number, just a rusted metal rectangle. But there were tire marks in the dirt. Fresh ones. I took the turn. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to stop being followed, and I figured I could cut across and find another way. But the new road was worse. Gravel, mostly rutted dirt, with trees pressing close on both sides. I drove slowly. My headlights bounced with every pothole. Dust filled the air behind me. I checked the rear view again. The car that was behind me didn't follow the turn. That should have felt like a relief, but it didn't. 5 minutes down that road, my headlights lit up a mailbox. Bent, rusted, no name. Behind it was a driveway winding up a hill into trees. A house sat at the top, just barely visible through the branches. Lights on in the windows. A single porch light glowing weakly. I pulled up slowly. I didn't want to, But I didn't have a choice. My tank was almost dry. My phone was dead. I hadn't seen another house in hours. I parked a little ways down the driveway, engine idling, and sat there. Then the porch light turned off. I didn't hear a door open, didn't see any movement.